coming. Oh, there we go. Remember the family, that's Ash the cat. If you watch Gardener's World, Ash has become quite famous over a very short period of time. So this is it. This is the main walled garden. I suppose I better set the scene. When we moved in 2016, this was a garden that had been stripped right back. And what I say, it had beautiful structure in there, and you imagine in its day, it was an incredible garden. I can even see the top of the wall there. I wonder whether this was actually, a real old walled garden with the veggies. Grass went right back to, more or less back to the walls. There was a gravel path. Very much the fruit trees were overgrown, and what is now becoming the meadow was literally just weed. We had some lovely old pear trees, and that was it. So I suppose the first thing to do as a designer is get to understand the space. So I tested the soil, and I live ultimately clay on a limestone bed. So everything would tell you it would be limey, limey, limey. But the one place that I thought that it might be closer to neutral was in my woodland. If you imagine over the years, the leaf mould, I did all these tests, and then I did it again, and something just didn't seem right. Anyway, I did it again, and the limiest place I've got in this garden is the woodland. So I suppose that, in a sense, tells you the story of test your soils. You dig about a foot down in there, and you hit solid limestone. So test it, understand it. Come on, let's go. We'll walk because we're talking. We'll walk. I suppose this is what I would do. I'd get out in the morning, 5 o'clock in the morning, with a cup of tea, and I'd walk. I'd work out where the sun come up, where the sun come down, then start to really understand the microclimates, where actually the frost sat at the end of the, early in the morning, where it got cold quickly, where the heat really started to stay. And then put the whole thing on paper. So measured it up, got it all on paper. There was a couple of areas that I could get stuck into, which I'll talk to you about in a minute, which is the veg garden in the front of the house. But when it comes to this space, it more or less designed itself in a way. I've always wanted a big herbaceous border. So that big long wall, and if Lil turns around now and goes right the back up, you'll get an idea. It's starting to come. Bear in mind, it's only sort of 3 years old. Even I can see it now. It looks lovely. Even I can see it. It looks all right. It's only 3 years old, and it's really coming. But there is rhythm, repetition, but there's diversity in there now. Interestingly, when I created the border, it still didn't feel quite wide enough. But I already had the gravel path in, I didn't want to gravel the path. So what I've done is develop the border again to make it wider this side. That sits more as an ornamental meadow, but hopefully it gives you that idea of scale, of space, and everything starts to layer nice back to the wall now. It felt a little bit abrupt. It felt you've got the path, the planting, and then the wall. So that's the herbaceous border. So walking down, this is sort of the west end of the garden, and this is our first little friend. So our first little friend, when I say, means that actually these were the same bricks that I used in my very first Chelsea garden, which I think was about 2007. So these are lovely York handmade bricks. But this is where the sunset, end of the day, you can come in here, have a lovely G&T, sit and enjoy. The only thing this is missing at the moment is some height. So this needs some sort of arbour over it, and then it becomes a big focal point. And then the planting very much is starting to sort of develop off the theme of the other herbaceous borders. But I'm using a lot of species roses through the bottom here as well. But this is really a project for this year. So if we keep walking, so, and the cat, he is friendly, I promise you. There you go, say hello. Ash, say hello. The cat's a bit of a diva. So, and what we inherited in the garden, as I said, was the fruit trees were totally and utterly overgrown. Given those a good prune, good sort out. We had these Buxton's hedgings. They're very, very old, but we've given them a lot of feed, a lot of love, and they're holding their own. They're holding their own. I sort of don't suffer a lot from blight up here. He crosses his fingers. So we're pretty well all right at the moment. But then if you turn and you look, last year's project really was the meadow. And I've always had a fascination with meadows, and I suppose got upset about the amount of meadows we've lost over the last, 50 odd years. We've lost 97% of our wildflower meadows. Just up the road from here is a lovely place called Hills and Holes, which is a site of special interest. The wildflower up there is absolutely incredible. We go walking up there and running up there, and and not only you know, orchids, but it's pulsatilla. It's one of, I think, 3 or 4 places in the country that pulsatilla grows, you know, natively. So what I decided to do was I wanted to put in a regional wildflower. So obviously I can't go up there and get the seed from up there, but I got the list from obviously the local councils, you know, and Natural England, and then started to track down all the different seeds. We sort of 50-50, we propagated some and we sowed some. So what I did is I cut the beds out, and then I actually put all the rubbish that we dug out for the terraces, bits and pieces, and really downgraded the sort of fertility of this soil. This is now going into year 2. We managed to get the yellow rattle going, which was fantastic. That's established in itself. That, if you don't know, is a parasitic plant. It feeds off the roots of the grasses, weakens the grasses. That then gives you more chance to get your wildflower going. But I'm pleased. You know, last year we put some Camassias in there, just starting to go over, and we've got the beehive in the middle there. And we cut the paths through, and we can adapt that and evolve that, and over a period of time. But they do take some managing. It's not one of those things you can just do and walk away. And I think the idea of what we were talking about, diversity, for me is also the way that I think about gardening and how to garden. I was lucky enough to work for a fella called Jeff Hamilton, who used to host Gardeners World many years ago. And Jeff, 30 years ago, was talking about peat-free, talking about stop ripping up limestone pavements, talking about organics before any of it became cool, trendy, you know. So that very early message was bashed into me as a 21-year-old, and I think in reality he set my sort of moral compass when it comes to gardening. So I've got to the point where I'm really trying to back off and create a garden that is not just about me and the family. It's about how we balance that with wildlife, not just the cats and the dogs, and what we can bring in. It's amazing, even over 3 or 4 years, the wildlife that comes in now is incredible. Anyway, let's get round. So you're now coming round to the woodland area. So probably at the moment, are you still here? She's coming with us. Ashley's coming with us. It's probably at the moment my favourite part of the garden. When we inherited this garden, it was totally and utterly overgrown with Prunus lusitanica. You've got these big old robinias that go all the way through the space. That gives you an idea that in its day, someone must have really cared, you know, to put a grove of robinia in. Overgrown with lusitanica. I came out on a Sunday morning with a chainsaw and cleared it, much to Mrs. Frost's surprise and disgust. But you had some great snowdrops in here, some winter aconites and some bluebells. So cleared it all, and then started to try and understand it. This is fantastic for the morning light, and then actually back end of the day, which is starting to happen now, you get beautiful sort of dappled light through the back. And then very much created the planting in layers. So first of all, trying to sort of bring all this large structure down into the space. So if you think about the hedge at the back there, I wanted to repeat the taxus somewhere, so that ended up being by these clip shapes, but they were just pieces of hedges that we've clipped into shapes. After that, how did I bring the robinia down? So I've started to add things like more nuts and some cornus mass, so that starts to create another layer, and hopefully in time that will fill a void that sits sort of above my head. And then we've put through lower buxus that pick up on an old lump that you'll see in a minute. And then really the planting in here is all about being calm, about being peaceful. So colour-wise, it's quite muted in a way. You know, it's blues, it's creams, whites, little dashes of yellow. Very much that sort of spring, but it's all about texture. And we're getting there. I've got little bits of planting still to do, but we're slowly getting there. So you wind yourself through the woodland, and this is a little area that we've just put in. So I like to come actually in the morning, just have a few minutes, have a cup of tea, because actually it feels, the atmosphere is lovely. And I think gardens for me, that's a lot of what they're about. They're about atmosphere, they're about stopping, enjoying the view. For me, the last few years have been about finding little spaces just to stop and be, really. I don't think we do enough of that in our gardens, and I found myself just drawn to this space in the mornings, and the light would be coming through, and it just felt really calm and beautiful, you know. And especially the times that we've had, you know, in recent months, for me, just escaping and just sitting and And I feel like I've been drawn to the detail of nature, you know, watching the bees and the birds and just listening, which has been incredibly therapeutic. But again, it doesn't have to be complicated. This is just a load of old logs I found in the back of the garage that we were going to burn, and I've made them into the seats. We've done a little bit of planting around, and it's a cracking place to come to. Right, we're on to the next bit. Not a lot of people have seen the next bit, and there's a reason for that. You'll see. This is an area that we've only just started sort of attacking. If you imagine all these yew trees came down to the ground, it was very, very dark. It probably still feels dark on there at the moment. We're slowly clearing it. This is going to be very much a wildlife garden. But as you come through, you can see at the moment the cow pasture sits in the corner there. It needs some sort of focal point. I think as we start to clear this area in here, this central space, I might add some water because I love the way that the light dapple and play. And this is, we might play with a little bit of wilding, a little bit of sort of just letting it go, see what happens, see what wildlife come in, but also see what plants are coming. You know, earlier on in the year, with some beautiful little violas in here. The primulas are really good. And then I want to create another little meadow area. And that meadow area is hopefully going to be edible. I don't mean all of it's going to be edible, but parts of it are going to be edible. I like the idea of being able to go into the garden, having a picnic and picking some of the stuff that we used to have a relationship with, you know, and dressing a salad with it or using it in a sandwich. So that is a project, you know, what will happen over the next couple of years. And obviously when we inherit gardens, a lot of us inherit nightmares, but we also inherit some positives. Look, laburnum, which again was absolutely covered in ivy. You couldn't really see, full of dead. It's had a good prune, and this year it feels like it said thank you very much. It looks absolutely incredible. Boom. But again, it feels different in this part, and I'm just going to go with that feeling. So as we move back round, we're coming back round to the other side of the house now, which you'll see the wisteria in a minute, which is very much the west side of the house. I think Mrs. Frost has realised she was coming and she's run inside the house because she won't want you seeing her. I'm just starting to sort of put the terracing areas in. We've put a little terrace area in on this side of the house, and I'm going to play with two maybe brick seating areas that sit up here. One maybe here will have a little fire pit, and then one here will have sort of round table and chairs. And then I'm going to start to enclose this area in a lot more planting. This is a lovely area to spend end of the day with the family, that lovely sort of west sun. So on we go, on we go. So now we're round to the front of the house, which you're just getting the back end of the wisteria. When we moved in, again, there was nothing here. There was the wisteria, there was a gravel path. I was never in a position to put big terraces in or bits and pieces like that, but again, I wanted the scale to feel right, so I've put this big areas of planting, and I like it when you're sat in the middle of the planting and you have to engage with the plant. So what we've done very much is put a gravel garden right the way through the front of the house. We're on the east side of the country. As a rule, apart from this winter, is very dry, so this part of the garden is planted very much with that in mind. And if you turn around and look down, what you can see now is you can now see the hedge that you were on the other side of with the woodland garden, and you can see how we're developing. When we moved in, we had a few roses, so we put the rose arches in. And the bottom end of the garden here, again, it was just somewhere we were drawn with the table and chairs, and we started having barbecues down here. So I've put a tiny little area in that's coming along. It's nearly finished, not quite. In fact, it's the time of year when I start sort of laying plants out again. So I'm laying bits and pieces out all over the shop. But, you know, we're drawn. I mean, I think that as well, when you're creating, is there a place in your garden that you're actually drawn to? So the little seating area's gone in, the structure planting's gone in, and now all the herbaceous is starting to work its way around. I hope you're enjoying it. Do you think they're enjoying it, Lil?
I hope so.
I hope so.
Using up my time.
They're going using up your time, bless you. Yeah. There you go. So we're eventually made it to the veg garden, which is ultimately where the garden started. I suppose you could call me sad. I get asked what my hobby is, apart from an interest in football and sport with my boys. It's veg gardening. You know, this is my hobby. This is where I come. But interestingly, I think during this period of time, we've spent a lot of time in here, and when it came to creating this, it wasn't just about me, it was about where I could drain the family. You know, amazes me that, you know, the moment you get the kids growing and they can eat it, they behave in a slightly different way. Don't they, Lil?
Of course.
Of course, she says, of course. And this was what it was about. So it was always going to be a garden to teach, because we set the school up, and that was one of the reasons we moved here. So when it comes to sort of, you know, the setting out of the raised beds, it was to demonstrate maybe different sizes, you know, to if you didn't have a lot of space, if you had more space. So you'll see the different sizes of the bed, sort of representation of that. But actually the layout of this garden purely came off the windows, which is the old Georgian windows. I put them down on the page and really started to sort of break it down, leaving gaps and using that patternation. I don't know why, but I've always wanted a grey greenhouse. So my grey greenhouse sits in the middle. The brick that you've seen repeated all the way around the garden is a colour that I love. It's that richy sort of terracotta, but the reason I've used brick around here is not only does it sit comfortable with the stone, but it tones everything down. So when the light bounces about, it just sucks that light in. But I've also got a very odd curved brick wall just at the back there, and I've just used that as a template to keep going. But just have a little look at what we've got going on. So it is that time of year. We've had loads of asparagus, so that's been great. Broad beans have given us a good feed. We had good early rhubarb with the forcing. Now that's settled down. And we just keep playing and experimenting. Like everybody else at the moment, I would imagine your greenhouse is exploding and what's going on. But I think in lockdown we've had a bit of fun as well. We've had a few competitions, you know, who can grow this, who can grow that. And the kids have really been involved in this. So I'd say to anybody, if you know you want to get your kids interested in gardening, try and do it through their bellies, you know. So we come out here, not only do they come out here to grow, but they come out here because we've got the pizza oven, which is just this little space at the back here. Oh, are you still going? Are you still going? Yeah. Oh, she's still going. Keep coming, keep going. So if you imagine now the raspberries, they'll get up, they'll create a hedge, and then they enclose this back area. This back area, pizza oven's there, seating, and I've planted this very much with slightly more unusual veg and gone back to my loved edible flowers. So in here we're going to have blackberries, you know, thornless blackberries. We've got different types of onions. We've got sorrels in here, and I could go on, and I could go on, and I could go on. But I think in reality, for me, this garden, I suppose, is not only is it way past my wildest dreams, but it's somewhere to play, it's somewhere to experiment, it's somewhere to share. And for me, that's what gardening is all about. It's all about not only you're doing it for you, you're doing it to share with maybe your family, share with your friends, but more than anything, share with wildlife. And that sound that you can hear, hopefully you can hear that, the birds singing, has changed massively since 2016 when we moved in here. So if you can garden a little bit more with wildlife in mind, and also biosecurity and diversity, you know, our gardens are only going to get better going forward. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed that. Lil, do you want to say bye-bye to everybody?
Bye.
She said, there you go, that was her poshest voice. So, bye-bye, thank you very much. Hope you've enjoyed it, and no doubt we'll see you again soon.